Hey guys, we're back with the notes for 6.5. I'm hoping this to be a quick, short, and sweet video because most of it is going to be done on the calculator. If you are in person, obviously I will show you how to do this on the handheld calculators using the Inspire steps. But if you are at home learning how to do this, you will be using Desmos, which is what I'm using in the video. If you would, first of all, start by pausing the screen and copying all the steps into the box. Do it for both of these because if you ever were stuck at home needing to do this for a test, I want you to have the Desmos steps. If you are taking a test or a quiz in class, you will need to know how to do it on the Inspire. Okay? Perfect. At this time, you should have everything copied down so far on the screen. I'm going to scroll up and ask that you go ahead and copy everything that's set up for problems 1 through 5. Okay, so that's the top section. Perfect. If you have all of this set up, you should recognize that all of the matrix have already been set from the system of equations. All of the new equations are set up to have ones on the diagonal. I'll explain what that means in a second. And all of the final answers are going to be these guys. These are written as points, either in 2 variables or in 3 variables. Okay? All right, so let's first start off by talking about a matrix. So a matrix is a way that we can solve a system of equations by taking out all of the variables and only focusing on the coefficients. So I'm going to zoom in for just a second. Let's talk through number 1. All right, so if I look at the coefficients matching here, I have a 3 and a -1 for the x's. That means this column represents my x's. For the middle, all my coefficients are in this middle column. That's a 1 for the y and a 2 for the y. This middle column represents the y's. If there were 3 variables, the third variable would be my z's. Since there is only 2 variables, this third column represents my equal values or my constants that are at the end. Okay? Once you understand where a matrix is coming from, we can start talking about the rest of this. Okay? So, when you solve a matrix, your goal is to put it in what's called reduced row echelon form. And if you did not do notes on 6.4, then I do want you to have this recorded. So we're going to call it reduced row echelon form. Okay? All right. Reduced row echelon form means I'm going to simplify it so that I have 1 on the diagonals of my matrix. If I was to scroll down a little bit, you'd notice I have 1s on the diagonals here. What that means is I'm solving for my x. If I had 1 x and no y's, what would it equal? If I had no x's and only 1 y, what would it equal? The calculator can give us this. If you did not watch the 6.4 notes, then this is the way we would do it without solving it by hand, okay? All right, so following the steps on the top of your paper, we're going to solve each of these. It's going to go pretty quickly. First of all, we're going to start a new matrix. It's going to automatically give us it as called A. In our first problem, we have only 2 rows, but we have 3 columns. So I'm going to add an extra column, and I'm just going to type out my coefficients. So 3, 1, 6. Down on the bottom, I've got -1, 2, and 12. I'm going to click that I want to press enter. That's the blue arrow. RREF, that's reduced row echelon. And then you just type whatever your matrix was. So ours was A. I type in the letter A, and it gives me the answers. So 1, 0, 0, 0. I'm writing that on my paper. And then 0, 1, 6. What that is telling me right here is that my X is a 0 and my Y is a 6. Okay? Very, very quickly, that's all you're doing. Let's try number 2. I don't even have to restart the whole thing. I can just edit the numbers and it will automatically do it for me. Okay? So if I edit my new matrix and I'm doing problem 2, so I'm over here. I'm typing in 1, 5, 1, and then across the bottom, I'm typing in -3, 4, 16. It's going to automatically change my reduced row echelon form. So again, I'm putting my answers in yellow here. It says that the first top number is a -4. The bottom is a 1. That means that's my x and y. -4, comma 1. That is my system solutions. Okay. Matrices are the fastest way to solve these, especially if you have a calculator to work with. Okay, let me move this over just a little bit. All right, let's try number 3. So I'm changing it to this one. Notice that I have an extra row now and an extra column. So if I go back up to this matrix and I add another row and I add another column, again, let me highlight real quick for you. That means I have X's, I have Y column, I have a Z column now, and I also have my equal column. Okay? That's where the numbers are coming from. All right, let's set this one up. So across the top, I have 1, 1, 1, and a 3. Middle row, I have -1, 3, 2, -8. And on my bottom row, I have 0 because there were no X's. 5 is my Y number, and then 1 was my Z, and it equals 2. My answer's coming down right here in the yellow. Let me write these guys down on my paper. So this comes out to be my X. Oops. Sorry about that. We're going to put our numbers over here. So this comes out to be 5, 1, and a -3. That is my X, my Y, and my Z. So the top one's X, middle one is Y, bottom one is Z. So 5, 1, -3 is my final solution. Okay. All right, moving over to problem 4. Same idea. Problem number 4, it is the same size matrix, so I can leave that alone. We can just edit the matrix that's already in there without having to start the process over again. So if I type in, I got 2, 3, 1, -3. Next row down, I have 1, -5, 7, -11. And in the bottom row, I have a -10, 4, -6, and a 28. Ooh, I'm curious if I wrote that one down wrong. Give me just a second to double check on my pieces. So, yep, I did. Right there in the middle, that 3 should be a -3. So this guy should be a -3. If you ever get crazy decimals like that, it probably means you have a typo. So if I change that to a -3, now it makes it a much prettier answer. So solving these guys out, I have -2, -1, -2. That's my X, Y, and Z. So -2, -1, -2. All right. We have one more like this. So if I go down to number 5, this one does have decimals. So kind of take that as open to what your answers might be. We're going to type this in, but I do need to change the shape of my matrix. So this one, if I drop down, it only has 2 rows, take 1 off, and it only has 3 columns, take 1 off. So if I edit this, I have 0.02, -0.05, -0.38, and on the bottom, we have 0.03, 0.04, and 1.04. And my answers come out to be whole numbers, so no big deal. Writing those numbers down right here, we have a 16 and a 14. That's my X and my Y. So 16, 14 is my answer. Okay. If you need to pause the screen for just a second to write down any of those work or the answers or anything about it, go ahead and do so now. We're going to do one application problem on the bottom, and then we're all done for this video. Okay. All right. Application video. It says not only are you going to write a system of equations, you're also going to make the make the matrix, solve it with the calculator, and then state what your answers mean. Okay, so I'm going to start in pink by writing my 2 equations. It says you and your sister decide to combine your weekly overtime earnings to buy a birthday gift for your mother. Your overtime rate is $18 per hour, and your sister's overtime rate is $24 per hour. The total amount earned for your gift was $288. Okay, so if I use Y for your earnings and S for sister's earnings, you are going to say you got 18 for each of your overtime hours and 24 per hour for her. Total was $288. So all of this is about money. We do still need one more equation if we're going to solve it. Second one says, if you work 2 more hours of overtime than your sister, how many hours did each of you work? Okay. So if I say you are 2 more than your sister, that's great, But I can't put that into a matrix. In order to put it into a matrix, I have to line it up like this. Y, S equals constant, okay? So right now, I know that my Y is already in the right spot, but how do I get the S to the other side of the equal sign? I'm gonna have to subtract it, move it to the other side. There's no number with S, so we would just leave both of these as ones. The equals 2 can stay on the side by itself, but we are going to put these two equations into my matrix, okay? All right, so writing out my matrix. Top equation, coefficients only. We've got an 18 for the Y, a 24 for the S, and 288 is what it equals. On the bottom, we have a 1 for the Y, -1 for the S, and a 2 is what it equals. So that's the matrix we're going to solve, and we're going to go straight to the calculator. We are wanting reduced row echelon, which puts the ones on a diagonal, and everything else should be zeros, okay? So I'm typing this guy in. It's already the right shape, so I've got 18, 24, 288, and on the bottom, we've got 1, -1, and a 2. It gives me the answers pretty smoothly. Especially in Desmos, you're not having to retype it, you're just editing it. So right here, it gives me 8 for the top one, 6 for the bottom one. Remember, if this is my your hours and sister hours, then this literally says, let me kind of scroll over here. This tells you 1y plus 0s gives you 8. That's telling you your y is 8. This one says 0y's plus 1s gave you 6. So in other words, the 6 is your S. I'm going to go ahead and write this out. That means you had 8 hours of overtime. Your sister had 6. If you need to, let me move this back. If you need to pause the screen for just a second, copy everything you see. We are all set. Remember, you do not need to start the assignment until we get to class.